Hello students, welcome to the class on Administration and Public Policy, wherein we will be understanding public policy through its concepts and theories. The objectives of this session are 1. To understand the meaning of the concept of public policy, 2. To throw light on the ingredients of public policy, 3. To comprehend the criteria for policy making, and 4. To elucidate the various models or the theories for policy analysis. Introduction. Public policy is the latest to join public administration as a subfield and is an amorphous and developing area. It extends across political science, economics, sociology, psychology and anthropology and is thus purely interdisciplinary. The term policy connotes two meanings. First, it refers to the ways of doing things, that is, decision rules. The question is, what are the rules and procedures? This may be called administrative policy. Secondly, policies may refer to substantive programs. According to this connotation, the content of what is being done is examined. Public policy refers to the policy of government and is used in both the senses. Studies of public policy making examine not only what the government is doing and how it is doing. It also examines how the content of the program or policy is administered. Policy has three ingredients: goals, a process to achieve the goals, and a value framework within which it functions. Policy connotes a positive side of an action. It emphasizes an initiative to solve a problem, and it may take the form of programs, projects and budget allocations. The pre-war literature of public administration emphasized the dichotomy between policy making and its implementation. Thus, politicians dominated the scene of policy formulation, whereas bureaucrats confined themselves to its implementation only. It is seen that till the Second World War, this dichotomy between politics and administration continued to plague public administration. The field of public policy has emerged comparatively recently. Its beginning may be traced to the early 50s. The concept of policy sciences was born in 1951 with the publication of Harold Lasswell and Daniel Lerner's The Policy Sciences, Relevant Developments in Scope and Method. Policy sciences are concerned with the social consequences and the policy implications of knowledge. They are problem-oriented and multi-method and thus deliberately move away from the fragmentary approaches. The discipline of policy studies has, however, grown substantially since the 70s. The initial impetus was provided by the policy problems related to civil rights, poverty, Vietnam, environment and women. However, the later concerns were the oil crisis, the unemployment, downsizing government and international trade. The large dependence on economics since the period of the Great Depression and the influence of J.M. Keynes was gradually replaced by influences from other disciplines, especially behavioral sciences, so that the problems of social and environmental policies could be studied by tools other than those provided by pure economics. Policy sciences today claim several innovations: operations research, program budgeting, cost-benefit analysis, forecasting, computer simulation, gaming, sensitivity training, brainstorming, social accounting and so on. Public policy may be defined as what the government say, do or do not do. It is the goals or purposes of government programs. Policy is a rationally planned course of action. Policy denotes deliberate choice of action or inaction. A policy may produce unintended effect. For example, the famine in Bengal in 1943. It refers to the goals or intentions of the government's leaders together with the programs of action designed to achieve these goals. A policy establishes a framework within which individual decisions are made. Thus, the definition of public policies entails these elements. 1. Policy involves purposive behavior. It is thus a deliberate course of action or inaction taken by policy makers in pursuit of objectives or in support of other policies. 2. It is the outcome of decisions about the allocation of resources. Policy must be distinguished from decision, even though it itself is a decision. 3. A policy provides the framework which then directs the individual decisions. 4. A policy may thus be defined as the sum total of decisions. It is an aggregative concept. It differs from a decision in scope as well as magnitude. It also differs from administration. Administration refers to implementation, while policy is a larger term signifying goal setting also. Let us now move on to the criteria for policy making. Policy making involves a large number of persons and institutions such as politicians, civil servants, parliamentarians, political parties, interest groups, professionals and experts. In India, there are nearly 400 policy makers at the central level and another 400 in the states. The total policy community has thus a strength of not more than 1000, of which 125 may be said to be the top ones. Policy making is done within the framework of the Constitution with its parliamentary and federal character. In addition, there are certain factors shaping policy making: public opinion, rational analysis and the political and economic situation. 1. Public opinion. One very powerful criterion of policy making is public opinion. That policies reflect public opinion is a widely held belief, for it is in complete harmony with democratic theory and thus carries an instinctive appeal. Democratic constitutions provide freedom of expression to the people. Elections are held on adult franchise and the majority party forms a government. This implies that election confers on the elected officials the role of determining national policies. Political devices like initiative and referendum also confirm people's role in policy making and policy unmaking. 2. Rationality. The second criterion of policy making is rational analysis of the issue under examination. This involves these steps: A. Identifying a problem requiring policy making. B. Clarifying and ranking goals. C. Collecting all relevant alternatives for realizing the objective and all available information on them. D. Predicting all the consequences of each alternative and evaluating them on cost-benefit analysis. E. Selecting the alternative which comes closest to achieving the goal. In practice, it is not possible to complete this drill in all its elaborateness. Besides, in policy making, technical questions are always intermixed with what may be called political ones, and even experts are seen to hold conflicting views. Economists and environmentalists are found on many issues to be locked in battle. 3. Political and economic situation. The third criterion of policy making is the political and economic situation. Inputs to policy making flow from the political and the economic environment of a country. Policy makers are constrained not only by the complexities of using public opinion or rationality as guides to policy making, but also by the actions of politicians, the legacy of the past, the nature of government organization, and economic considerations. Let us now turn to the models or approaches to public policy. In analyzing public policy, we can construct maps, models, and approaches to constitute the frameworks within which and through which we can explain problems and social processes. There are different ways of looking at public policy. Each has a distinct focus and each suggests specific things about public policy. The models used in studying public policy are conceptual models. Models serve many purposes. 1. They simplify and clarify one's thinking about public policy and politics. 2. They identify important aspects of policy problems. 3. They help one to communicate with others by focusing on the essential features of public life. 4. They direct one's efforts to a better understanding of public policy by suggesting what is important and what is not. 5. They suggest explanations for public policy and predict its consequences. Public policies are of different types. They may be simply regulative, organizational, distributive or extractive, and also be a mix of all the different categories. The third world policies tend to focus on the developmental aspect and yet be a mixture of all the above categories. There are protectionist policies and also policies which are liberal, hawkish and ambitious. There are four major approaches to policy analysis. They are systems, institutional, elite and group approaches. These approaches concentrate upon policy determinants. There are three approaches: rationalist, empirical and intuitive approaches which are concerned with policy process or its consequences. For the sake of convenience, we can consider various models to help understand public policy. The major ones are: 1. The elite theory or model. This theory of policy making is most closely related to public servants. They are perceived by this theory as a ruling elite rather than public servants. This theory contends that most people are apathetic and do not possess the requisite information to equip them for policy making. They are thus passive, and the small ruling elite makes the policies which reflect the ruler's values. The emphasis of the policies is on status quo. C. Wright Mills, the power elite, provides the classic enunciation of the elite theory. 2. The group model. A. F. Bentley's The Process of Government in 1908 propounds the group theory. This theory argues that a society is divided into a number of organized groups and lobbies. The thrust of the group model is towards the legislature rather than the bureaucracy, though the bureaucracy too is buffeted by pressure groups. Researchers show that many regulating agencies in public administration have been captured by the groups that are meant to regulate. In other words, the regulated in practice emerges as a regulator. According to this theory, public policies really benefit the groups which are mostly directly affected by these policies. This particularly happens in the absence of countervailing organized groups. 3. The systems theory. This theory portrays public policy as an output of the political system. Outputs are the formally announced decisions and intended consequences of governmental action. The concept of system implies that the elements of the system are interrelated, that the system can respond to forces in its environment, and that it will do so in order to preserve itself. Inputs are received into the political system in the form of both demands and support. Support is rendered when individuals and the groups accept the outcome of the elections obey the laws, pay their taxes, and generally conform to policy decisions. Any system absorbs a variety of demands, some of which conflict with each other. In order to transform these demands into output public policy, it must conceive settlements and enforce them upon the parties concerned. 4. The incremental theory. The word increment means a small increase in quantity to add a small amount to, often at regular intervals. The incrementalist theory contends that only limited policy alternatives are provided to policy makers, and each of these alternatives represent only a small change in the status quo. The incrementalist theory puts the bureaucracy in a conservative mold, ever tied to the past and slow to change. Sunk costs, these are the former commitments which effectively limit policy initiatives and thus choices. They also rule out radically new course of action. Incremental theory is conservative. It does not question the validity of past policies which were formulated in a piecemeal way under parochial considerations. 5. The rationalist theory. In a sense, the rationalist theory is the opposite of the incrementalist theory. The rationalist theory seeks to find out all the value preferences existing in a society, assign each value a weightage, find out all the alternatives as well as all the consequences of each alternative, and in the end make the final selection in terms of the costs and the benefits of social values. The rationalist model is reflected in operations research, program evaluation and review technique, PERT, critical path method CPM, and zero-based budget. A rational policy is one which maximizes social gain. This is another way of saying that no policy should be adopted if its costs exceeds its benefits. Secondly, the policy maker should choose that policy that produces the greatest benefits. A public policy is rational when the difference in its benefits and disadvantages is greater than that in any other policy. 6. Planning, Programming, Budgeting System, PPBS. The Planning, Programming, Budgeting System, or PPBS as it is better known by its abbreviated name, is a rather novel method of decision making in the field of budgeting. PPBS is an interrelated series of several devices. Techniques like systems analysis, cost benefit analysis, cost effectiveness are used to describe the individual components of PPBS. It was invented in USA in the early 1960s and installed in the US Department of Defense. It thus introduced new methodologies of the decision sciences into the government budgeting decisions. The PPBS is a powerful technique of directing the budgetary resources most rationally to the achievement of goals. The principal decision stages in the PPBS are: A. Define the major programs in each area of public service. B. Define the principal outputs or goals of each program. C. List the inputs which generate the outputs. D. Compute the costs of alternative combination of inputs and the outputs. E. Calculate the cost benefit ratio associated with each combination of inputs and outputs. 7. The cost benefit theory. This is the most commonly used approach in evaluation studies. It employs the balancing of the costs and the benefits of the policies in a manner so that the profits and losses could be assessed in purely economic terms. The approach emerged in the Water Resource Development Department of USA, and it considered these elements: A. Objectives of the policy. B. Alternative program strategies. C. costs and resources utilized in the policy process. D. The model applied. E. The criterion of choice. This is the most reliable, simple and clear-cut system of analysis, but it is incapable of evaluating policies of the intangibles like the impact of the free meal policy upon children, upon their performance, or the loss of environment due to the mining, or the impact of oil refinery on the coastal marine and human life. For example, the value of a tree or a forest cannot be assessed only in terms of its timber value, but the oxygen it gives, the tribal habitation, the biodiversity it shares, the water it recharges, and the psychology it generates amongst all those who experience it or inhabit it. The cost-benefit analysis is incapable of assessing all these complex variables in public policy. 8. The public choice theory. The motivation for the public choice theory of policy making lies in the inherent propensity of the career bureaucracy to expand its power. It serves itself rather than the public interest. The bureau behavior is self-seeking and self-expanding. The public choice theory argues that the solution to the problem of political and bureaucratic obsession with vote and self-interest lies in the introduction of market forces into public administration. As market means free competition, it alone can successfully combat the evil of the separate interests, that is self-interest, of the constituent units of a system, and thus conserve public interest. Free competition may take the forms of contracting out, privatization, increasing competition between government. Many empirical studies show that contracting out leads to lower expenditure and higher efficiency. External contractors show lower expenditure and higher efficiency. This supports the public choice theory. This theory makes three assumptions. First, it focuses on the rational, that is, the economic man. Secondly, it assumes that public good requires the cooperative behavior of citizens. The third assumption is the desirability of institutional arrangements. The theory contends that the role of public administration is to develop decentralized, small-scale service systems at different levels of government. It believes that a mixture of economics and politics is an innovative way of restructuring the delivery systems. The public choice theorists advocate increased economic incentives or markets for public administration, adopt economic analysis to understand political behavior. These theorists make the individual as the unit of analysis. In their view, the individual is a rational being acting in self-interest. Their aim is to give greater choice to individuals. They encourage government to provide plurality of institutional choice or quasi-markets. In short, the public choice theorists apply the principal agent theory of the firm to public administration. The game theory. The game theory is an abstract and deductive theory or model of policy making. It is a form of rationalism applied in competitive situations where the outcome depends on what two or more participants do. A conflict situation is called a game. The game theory is a study of rational decisions in situations in which two or more participants have choices to make and the outcome depends on the choices each of them makes. The theory is put into application in policy making situations where there is no independently best choice which one can make and where moreover the best outcome depends on what others do. In the conflict situation, all participants try to maximize their gains and minimize their losses. The game theory is applicable to competitive problems, that is conflict situations. It can be applied to decisions about war and peace, diplomacy bargaining, or coalition in parliament or the United Nations. The prisoner's dilemma. This is a special type of game in game theory. It entails rational selection of strategies, which though may be less profitable than non-rational selection. It makes certain assumptions. The prisoner's dilemma is a game in which both participants must take a risk and be prepared for a minor loss to avoid disastrous consequences to both. This is an example of a game to study participants' responses in conflict situations. The game theory's chief value lies in encouraging thoughtful examination of options prior to action, which is obviously useful to policy makers. At the same time, a rigid and simplistic faith in it could be counterproductive. The garbage can model. In every society, there are certain pet solutions which are on the lookout for problems. Problems are even deliberately manufactured in a bid to invoke and justify such solutions. Complex problems get so presented to suit the fanciful ideas of the policy makers. Fond solutions thus queue up and make a search for the problems. In other words, a society at a particular time has within it certain ready solution-based lobbies or groups which are in search of their constituency. This theory is called the garbage can theory of policy making. Conclusion. Students, we can now conclude that traditionally public administration has accepted public policies as given and has concentrated on the machinery for implementation of these objectives. This is no longer valid. Public policy making has come to acquire widespread attention, and today both scholars and practitioners have begun to attach importance to this field. Thank you.